Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Fantasy Baseball. I am John Ka, and unfortunately, Patrick could not be here with us today, but we do have a special guest, Kyle McCarthy, who is going to be talking about his article on Andy Pages. But before we get into all of that information, just a reminder, you can follow our podcast on Twitter at ThisWeekPL. Send us your fantasy baseball questions to our email at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. And lastly, make sure you subscribe to or follow the podcast on whatever streaming platform that you listen to. We're on all of them: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you listen. Make sure you follow us and give a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. Today's a little bit of an abbreviated episode, a little different than our normal podcast. We're not going to be doing our player recaps this week, but we are going to cover some injury news as well as some streamers. But we're going to do that after our interview because we are joined by Kyle McCarthy, as I mentioned. You were on the pod a couple months ago to talk about bat speed. I know that was like a fun episode, just kind of filled with a lot of analytics and numbers. Whereas this time, we're just going to focus on one player, specifically Andy Pages, who you wrote an article on a couple days ago. Turning the page, Andy Pages looks like a star. And yeah, he's been one of the players that's probably been taking the fantasy world by storm in the past couple of months, and looking forward to dive into that just a little bit. But for those who might have missed the last time you were on the show, Kyle, can you just give yourself a quick introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I was on the show a few months ago, just talking about some bat speed risers and reducers. And yeah, been Duluth for a few months now. Going on the Going Deep team, doing player deep dives, and year over year improvers, things like that. Yeah, most recent one on 85 just diving in, fresh off. It was funny. I was writing an article about him. Before, like in the midst of his 4 for 4 2-homer
Yep.
night, so the
Yeah.
timing of it was kind of ideal for me. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun diving into him and diving into a whole lot of other stats and players.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't end up being a little bit of a cursed article. We've had a couple of those
Right.
where someone's come on and it's like, oh, sorry, yeah, he's out for
Yeah.
season now.
Oh,
So,
no doubt. Yeah, I had an
yeah.
article on Noel Marte, and
Oh, yes.
right around the same week, he went down with an injury. So it's pretty typical.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But hey, at least Pages is doing well, right?
Hey,
So,
right, exactly.
yeah. So let's dig into Pages. I was just trying to figure out some like historical stuff on him. Like, I mean, he was a fairly heralded prospect. I mean, he was on some top 100 lists. But I was just looking at, where he was ranked in 2024 last year when he made his
Hmm.
major league debut. And I was looking at PitcherList's own prospect preseason preview in 2024 for the Dodgers. And he was ranked 11th in the organization right after or right before, I think, Trey Sweeney, of course, who's now with Detroit. Um,
Hmm.
the hype around him was certainly the power potential, right? He hit a ton of homers in the minors. And the one thing, though, was in 2023, he was dealing a bit with a hand injury, ended up only having around 140 plate appearances. So a little bit of an unknown coming into 2024. How would you characterize his prospect journey up until his debut last season?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he was a good prospect. He was, consistent top 100 prospect. Really strong production as a minor leaguer. He was one of 6 hitters since 2010, age 21 or younger, to 25 homers in Double A. It was in 2022. There's 3 hitters actually since 2010. It was Ronnie Mauricio, Andy Pages, and Morelvis Martinez. Those are 3 examples there, and then Fremel Reyes, Willie Calhoun, Domingo Santana were the other ones. So not the greatest list as far as some of those other guys are now out of the league, and Fremel Reyes and Domingo Santana in particular in Japan. But I think the difference there is Pages clearly doesn't have the same contact efficiency. Like that's been a big step forward for him this year, is improving. I mean, it wasn't bad as a rookie at all. It was 24%, which is completely bearable, completely within the fine range for a rookie. But he's made that big step this year, and yeah, like I said, he was had really good production all throughout his minor league career. Hit really strong power numbers, solid averages. There was definitely some seasons where the K rate was a little bit spiked, but I mean, this is among the best strikeout rates he's had here this year in the majors. So yeah, I mean, it's just an example of a good prospect, good not great prospect. Just continually improving. I think that I point to the defense as a really just a great sign of his ability to improve and improve on his areas of weaknesses. He was one of the worst outfielders last year by various metrics, and this year he's been among the best. So I think that's definitely a credit to him.
Yeah, going back to that season last year, right? Just looking at his numbers, slash line was 248, 305, 407. So nothing terribly remarkable. He had a perfectly average WRC plus right at 100. So honestly, like you kind of
Hmm.
take that from a 23-year-old, right? As a
Yeah.
rookie, like he was like, hey, he's a league average hitter. I'll take that. Um,
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
mentioned some of the small things, right? Like 24% strikeout rate, indicative of maybe some of the maybe good contact that could be coming. Was there anything else
Hmm.
in that 2024 season that could have predicted the breakout that he's having this year?
Mhm. Yeah, I think just pointing to those that number in particular, the strikeout rate, and then the barrel rate being at nearly 11% as a rookie. I think you just kind of look at those two numbers in isolation and think that that's a pretty strong rookie season. Like he didn't strike out an overly amount. Like I said, batted ball profile was pretty balanced. And then you look under the hood a little bit. He pulled the ball in the air. He was in the 66th percentile for pull fly ball rate as a rookie. He didn't whiff too much against secondaries, 62nd percentile for whiff rate against secondaries. He didn't chase, chase a little bit, a little bit more above average, but it wasn't, an obscene amount there too. So, and like I said, hit the ball hard. So, he checked a lot of boxes as far as making contact, hitting the ball hard, not being, totally overmatched against breaking balls. Yeah, you add all that together and you get, a roughly league average hitter for a rookie, 23-year-old rookie. Yeah, I think you take that more times than not. We get spoiled a lot of times by these rookies that come out of the gate, really hot. You think of the Julio rookie seasons, Tatis rookie season, Soto, all those. Not that positives on this caliber of tier as a prospect or anything, but we just get over our heads sometimes with our expectations for prospects. And I think his in particular, being an average hitter is definitely an above average outcome for a prospect. So I think, yeah, all of that together and just the power and contact blend is what you want to see. So,
Yeah, I was looking at his Fangraphs prospect report. They had him as high as 68th overall in terms of all
mhm.
prospects last season with a future value of 50. I think what's surprising is that they gave him, a 30 grade in the hit tool and a 40 future value grade, which, I
Right.
mean, I guess if you take into account some of the relatively, I wouldn't say even high strikeout numbers, right? He got up to 20, uh, in 2023, it was like a 17.8% strikeout rate, but that was in Double A and Triple A. His averages, I
Hmm.
guess, have always been in the mid 200s, even going as far back as rookie ball. So there, in some
Hmm.
respects, is like, yeah, he wasn't necessarily uh, the greatest at hitting for average in the minors, so
Hmm.
to speak. But his real calling card was, or I guess, is that power, like you mentioned.
Hmm. Right. Right. Yeah, and it's funny. Like
Is
he's definitely not projected. Like same thing. Like he's projected to strike out more than he is right now, and projected to walk more than he is right now. So
mhm.
I think there's area of regression with his strikeout rate possibly, and progression with his walk rate. So could cancel out and just end up being about the same quality hitter. So.
Right. All right, well, let's get into this year because that's what we want to talk about, right? Is how,
Hmm.
how Andy Paz has been breaking out.
Hmm.
And so he started out the season pretty poorly. Before we get to the cool stuff, uh, it was a pretty awful beginning 3 weeks for him at the beginning of the season, which probably explains why he was fairly available on most waiver wires
Right.
right before his kind of breakout moment. Anything worrying that kind of came up in that time, or was it just a guy that was just kind of you know uh, maybe starting the season a little cold?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think because there was definitely somebody that was on my radar as far as this is somebody that looks like he's gonna play a
Hmm.
lot in the Dodgers outfield, Dodgers lineup. So, just right off the bat, appealing from that standpoint. Um, but yeah, he got up to a rough start. In the first, I think, 75 plate appearances, he was striking out, 30% of the time, not hitting the ball hard. So. there wasn't a ton, to cling on to, as far as, hold on, he's doing some things right. Just have some patience. Other than, just the fact that he was still playing every day. I think that's more than anything is the fact that he was, giving them good defense. I think that's part where the defensive value comes into play is he was giving them good defense and he was still, giving them reason to play every day, which is, not the Dodgers. It seems like they always have, a better option if the starter's not playing. They have somebody else that steps up and can produce. But yeah, he was providing value on the defensive side while his back came around, and yeah, since April 21st, he's been, I mean, one of the most valuable players in baseball. Just from an F4 perspective, he's been one of the best. He's stealing bases, hitting homers, hitting for average. Doing all the things you want in fantasy. Um,
Hmm.
so, yeah, I think it was definitely not something you could have like predicted just based off his first handful of plate appearances. Um, but again, you can just kind of look back at what he did as a rookie over an extended period of time and saw that, he hit the ball hard. He wasn't totally overmatched, from a strikeout perspective. Um, but again, I don't think we could have predicted to this point, to this extent, how well he's done. He's hitting 290 with 15 homers in June. So that's a pretty massive leap. But still, there's probably just knowing what we know from last year, what he did last year, and just the fact he wasn't going to be that bad all season, he could have projected something in the middle. So, but yeah, it's been a remarkable step forward.
Yeah, I mean, we don't usually talk about defense in any
Mhm.
context for
Yeah,
fantasy, except for the fact that like, well, being available is partially a
Mhm.
fantasy asset, right? Like
Yeah,
that
no
was the whole
doubt.
story. Whole story behind PCA last year was that like, well, he's not like a really good hitter, but he plays every
Yeah,
single day because he's one of the
yeah,
best defensive center fielders. I mean, it's kind of been incredible this year that he's managed to turn that
Mhm.
bat into a 2020 bat already in
Right.
June. So.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's what we talk about with like those speedy guys. Like, oh, at least
yeah,
they're gonna play like as their defensive value is driving it.
yeah.
But yeah, with these more higher upside guys, like guys that can hit for power, guys that can hit for average. It is important to consider defensive value. Like if their defense is poor enough, they're not going to play enough. But if they can do it all, then yeah, they're just one of the best players in baseball. So
Yeah, Pies goes from a -1 DRS last season to 10 this year.
Mhm.
Uh,
Right,
and
yeah.
then specifically playing in center field, obviously a premium position, goes from -8 to 2 this year, which is
Mhm.
yeah, definitely quite impressive for
Right.
a guy who's again only 24 years old.
Mhm.
So getting into the bat then, basically since April 21st, right? He's hit 13 homers, he's stolen 6 bases, strung off a little bit of that power speed combo, slashing 335, 352, 590. Obviously, really incredible numbers out there. And one thing you mentioned that he's improved in 2025, looking back to 2024, is specifically in regards to his power and contact metrics. And one thing I want to talk about with you about, since obviously you're, a little bit of the bat speed guy right now, what about that swing has improved in 2025? That's maybe is a little bit of an explanation for why he's seeing so much success.
Mhm. Yeah, so definitely just kind of looking at his profile dating back to last year is there's a great Twitter account called Swing Graphs. They had that tweet that I included in the article, just how before all this became public, he had the traits of someone with a good swing path, somebody that can spray a lot of line drives, hit for power, lift the ball, do all the things that we want for fantasy. And I think that's just kind of as we've gotten more information, know more about these hitters. That's something that we know now about him. That he has, this a really ideal swing path. He's like he has a 40-degree swing path tilt, which is one of the metrics on Baseball Savant. So just measuring, what the angle is at the time of making contact. And he's one of there's only about 6 or 7 hitters with that steep of a tilt, and there's even less, with that combined that level of tilt with a plus above average bat speed. So the only hitters I include the table in there in the article is only James Wood, Bradley Green, DeZenzo, Zach DeZenzo, Torkelson, and Andy Baez. So it's definitely not a super common um, combo there. It's definitely ideal though, as far as lifting the ball, hitting for power, pulling the ball, all those sorts of things. So yeah, knowing what we know about his swing path, it's definitely ideal for hitting for average, hitting for power, and doing all the things that we want. So
Yeah, and maybe looking at swing path specifically, or just not swing path specifically, but just kind of the swing, right? Like of those players you mentioned, Pa Hayeswood, Zenzo Green, Torkelson,
mhm,
he's also got the longest swing length out of all of them,
right.
right? 7.9
Mhm,
feet. Torkelson's right behind him at 7.8. We're talking about a couple inches here, but
mhm,
you kind of mentioned in the article he goes from 7.7 feet to 7.9 this year. How
mhm.
how does that increase in like a couple inches of swing length? How does that improve someone's performance at the plate, or how could it explain improve performance at the plate?
Yeah, it's tricky. Sometimes the way you think of those things with the swing length is, shortening up means, you're, prioritizing contact essentially,
Hmm.
which is, what the inverse is what Pa has done here. He's extended his swing length to longer, and he's making more contact, which is typically not, the combination you would think of. But it's worked for him. He's actually he's lessened his bat speed a little bit. Who knows if that's intentional? Is it within the margin for error of just a couple of ticks to where it's
Yeah. Hmm.
could just be noise. Um, yeah, it's definitely an odd thing. Not something you typically see. Just generally you expect if somebody's reducing their swing length, you would expect them to make more contact. But in this case here, Pa has dramatically has cut his strikeout rate by about 8%, 7%, while increasing his swing length. So, kind of a funny thing there. I'm not sure. I don't have a great explanation for it. Um, but yeah, certainly looks like he's um, on a contact heater right now. Who know? Yeah, it could be a thing where his contact rate, his strikeout rate, falls back that low 20% range here moving forward, which is what a lot of projections say. Um, so that's definitely part of it.
Yeah, and it's speaking specifically to the contact piece, right? You mentioned in the article the zone contact rate's up by nearly 5 points. It's now
Mhm.
basically
Yeah.
90%. So he's making good contact on stuff that's
Hmm.
inside the zone.
Hmm.
But I think one interesting thing that you point out is kind of the pitches that he's seeing, and I think we see this a lot with young hitters. I know, especially as a Twins fan, I'm familiar with how Matt Wallner and Trevor Lornick really struggled against anything that wasn't a fastball.
Hmm.
The first
Right.
couple seasons they were up in the majors. With Pages, he's seen fewer fastballs. He's seen more breaking balls this season. Maybe that's just a scouting thing where teams like, well, we got to take advantage of this guy, right? He's going to be playing every single
Hmm.
day. And yet he's adapted to what he's seeing, where just he's actually just better against all types of
Hmm.
pitches, right? Fastballs,
Yeah.
breaking balls, off speed.
Yeah.
You mentioned he's hitting 4 homers off sliders this year. Um,
Hmm.
how much of a product is that like of just improvement year by year and becoming a better hitter, and how much of that is maybe some mechanical adjustments that he's making?
Yeah, I think it just speaks to his overall improvement. I think because yeah, I would have to look more into it, but just looking at his his Savant page, he's slugging over 500 against each pitch group, which is pretty remarkable. I would venture to guess there's not many hitters that can say the same about that. Just being varied and multiple against being able to hit fastball, sliders, and just general off speed. Um, because generally you want to be at least on one of those. Like you want to be sitting fastball, you want to be anticipating breaking ball. I feel like most hitters are sitting fastball and reacting to breaking
Hmm.
ball. So I think that's one thing. But he's made more contact, hit for more power against all pitch groups. It's really just been a remarkable improvement in that area.
Yeah, you even got like two graphics from Savant, just kind of looking at his heat map essentially
Hmm.
in the zone, specifically looking at Woba, and it's like in 2024, it's very concentrated
Hmm.
on on the inside, down and inside on the plate, and then
Hmm.
for 2025, it's a little bit more widespread on where the success is happening.
Mhm. Yeah, he's definitely, I think that's one thing about all the great hitters is they have, multiple swings for multiple, locations, multiple
Hmm.
pitches. And that's kind of what we're seeing here is, he wasn't able to reach that high and outside. zone last season. High fastballs blow him away. You can see that's turned red this year. He's hitting for damage there too. Kind of typical sweet spot for hitters is low and in, so he's still doing damage there, which you love to see. And he's taking advantage of damage in the or of pitches in the zone. And he's not quite as bad. Like you see some of those blue areas from last season down and away. He's gotten that zone to do just closer to average. So
Yeah,
getting going from bad to average is as valuable as going from average to good in a lot of instances. So yeah, just making your just shoring up your weaknesses, making your strengths continue to be strengths. I think that's the trademark of great hitters, and has the look of one.
yeah, definitely. All right, so Pies is still 24, so let's look to the future a
Mhm.
little bit. He's only in his second season. There's still plenty of growth. I mean, the de facto is like everyone kind of hits their prime around 27, 28,
Mhm.
29. That's what they all like to say, the growth charts and things like that. So, where can he see some improvement in his game, right? I mean, obviously he right
Mhm.
now he's one of the best outfielders there, but there's still always something to improve on. What would you like to see kind of Pages at least work
Mhm.
on to kind of add to the game?
Yeah, so I mentioned, just earlier, how, he had double digit walk rates basically all throughout his minor league career, really solid approach. And, he's just he's chasing definitely more, being more aggressive this season, which you can't argue with the results. You can argue with what he's done. As he ages, I think, swing decisions get better. You tighten up, you understand the zone a little better. So I think that in that aspect, he can, maintain, his power, but just improve his swing decisions because he was in the 66th percentile in Seager last season. The swing decision metric by Robert Orr, is kind of good proxy for if you're making good swing decisions and you're able to hit for power. Um, so he's a little bit down in that area. He's in the 24th percentile this season. So there's definitely a little bit of a step back there. Obviously, hasn't impacted him too much, but I think just getting slightly better with swing decisions and staying in the zone a little better, and then pulling the ball in the air a little more. He's just slightly down in that sense too, but I think being able to spray the ball in all directions with a slight lean to the pull side is generally a good recipe, and he's right in line with that. So I think there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of positive areas here.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have you had a picture there about the aging curves of
Hmm.
batters and their walk rates,
Hmm.
peaking around 29, which is kind of like, yeah, this guy's a 24-year-old, right?
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
there's growth, yeah.
Yeah, there's plenty. Yeah, he's only 23-year-old rookie, 24-year-old this year. So yeah, you think of a lot of hitters. I think Aaron Judge is like the outlier example. He was
Right.
25-year-old as a rookie. So, but yeah, I think that you just forget like these guys can definitely improve upon areas that are not at the top of their peaks right now. Maybe not like he's never going to be a huge walk rate guy just because he has been pretty aggressive typically, but um, all the projections point to close to a league average walk rate around 7-8%. And then strikeout rate settling around 23%, which is, I think a
Hmm.
fair thing to expect.
So then, just looking for this season and maybe like even a couple of seasons in the future, what do you think Pai's ceiling kind of looks like, maybe this year and then as he continues to age?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think some of the projection systems are pretty bullish this season, like some projecting close to 30-10 season by the Bad X, which is obviously a big time ceiling. I think, a good player I think of is his teammate, Teoscar Hernandez. I think he's a decent example because he's, a similar power threat. I think Pages in his best seasons can get near maybe not quite near the ceiling that Teoscar'd shown. He was around 35 at his peak. I think Pajes could be around 30 in the future years, 25 to 30. And then there's varying, confidences on what he's going to hit for average, kind of depending on what his striker rate totals has. But, if he's in the 260 to 270 range, there's some seasons out there, just based on his home run totals, his stolen base totals, and that, like a 260 to 275 average. There's the Nick Castellanos season from a couple years ago with the Phillies. Really strong season there, 29 homers. 260 average, 272 average, and then handful of stolen bases. There's a couple of Manny Machado seasons in there. So there's just really, it really is kind of depending on his range of outcomes. If he can match that kind of season, which is projected for by the BATX this year, about 268, 29 homers, 10 stolen bases. That's a different conversation because that's a real legitimate star. Then on Fangraphs, they have their Zips 3-year projections. It's a little more, conservative. 240 average, 25 homers, 3 stolen bases. So that's more in the range of like a Randall Grichuk, Hunter Pence, um, you know, Wilson Contreras. There's some seasons in there that are less exciting, but still mid 20 homers, a non-zero stolen bases, and still 250, 240 average, which is um, still not terrible. So I think there's definitely as a young player, there's definitely a lot of range of outcomes for him still, um, and we're still kind of seeing that play out in live time. So
Yeah, and I think uh, it's funny you mentioned Teoscar.
mhm.
Just because, I mean, Teoscar, like, obviously the power has been a great thing for him.
Yeah,
There was the blip in Seattle, which I think most people knew that wasn't going to really
right.
turn out well. But he's
Hmm.
always been known for the really high strikeout rates. And I think the
Yeah,
thing with Pages, right, is like last year he was at 24%. Right now he's at
and
18%.
that's been the high mark. Yeah,
Yeah, and
Teoscar's
like
always been the 20%. Yeah, mid 20s.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
So there's kind of some sense of like, well, even Pages like might be able to, have even a little bit better like contact metrics or bat for
yeah.
a little bit better average than maybe even to
Yeah.
Oscar. But
Yeah,
yeah.
maybe not quite as much power, but yeah, a little more average.
Hmm.
But yeah, and then I think also just it's not necessarily fantasy relevant. We're just kind of talking as far as what it would look like fantasy wise, because homers, steals, average, all those sort of
Yep.
things. But he's just going to be a better defender. I feel like I think Teoscar is never really known for his defense.
Hmm.
Um, so there's definitely, I think there's like Teoscar is definitely a good athlete. So I wonder what the stolen base numbers look like for Pages eventually, because they weren't huge in the minor leagues, kind of in that 5 to 10 range consistently. And he's not projected for a crazy amount, but he's in the 80th percentile for sprint speed. He's a pretty good athlete. So I wonder if that's just a decision thing if he wants to be aggressive or not, or a team philosophy thing. If they want to be aggressive. So that could be another determinant of what his upside looks like.
Yep. All right, we are going to kind of go back to an old game we have on the podcast, which is just looking at players for the rest of the season, 5 by 5 fantasy, kind of your standard setup, and just kind of ranking a couple guys. And I was looking
Mhm.
at just kind of young outfielders who are either having breakout seasons or maybe a little cold for one of these guys specifically. But yeah, I'm going to give you a group of outfielders and kind of just rank the rest of the season of how, who would you like on your fantasy teams. And if there's like context specific stuff, feel free to add that as well. I know one
Mhm.
of these guys might be a little bit more important in certain contexts. But yeah, so we got Andy Pages, got Jackson Churio, Riley Green, and Heliot Ramos, all kind of young outfielders who
Mhm.
have shown some stuff in the past 2 seasons. Um, yeah, how would you rank any of these guys? And is there maybe some specific guys you like a little bit more than others in certain contexts?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, so I think that's interesting quartet of names there. I would still stick Chorio at the top. I still think he's still it seems like he's had a little bit of a down season, but still you love to see those home run and stolen base totals. So I would still put him there at the top. The ceiling's still the best, and then it gets a little murkier there. I would still put Riley Green second though. I believe the power really looks legit. And then the stolen bases, you're talking about a different thing. They're going to be in the single digits, but um, power looks really legit, really, really strong play discipline. So it is, a little bit league specific. If you're in an on base league, Riley Green, a little more valuable. Andy Pa has an average league, maybe a little more valuable. But the gap is definitely tightened up a little bit between Green and Pajes for the third slot. I would put Ramos fourth, just for I think ballpark specific things and just skill set wise, I think he's probably a little bit below these other guys. But yeah, I think I would go Churio, still highest ceiling. Riley Green, definitely the biggest power upside there. And then Paul has, good mix. He's just kind of, I think you would ideally like him to be Churio, like what Churio is. So he's a kind of a diet version, like speed wise as well. And then, yeah, I would go Ramos last. So Churio, Green, Pajes, Ramos is what I would go with there.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense, right? Like Churio, I mean, I know this season hasn't necessarily gone as
Mhm.
well as maybe some people are expecting, but he's still a 30-30 threat
Yeah, he's
at any
still going to be
point.
right at 30-30, and,
Hmm.
average is still pretty good. So I know he's chased more, struck out more, but the upside is still right there for me. So,
Yeah, and I do think the gap between Green and Pies is pretty close. With
hmm
Green probably still a hair above it, but
yeah.
he's got a couple more. I think maybe one more homer, maybe, or they
hmm
might be tied in homers. The average is a
Like
little
they
bit
are
better.
tied. Yeah.
They are tied right now. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
they're tied. Averages maybe is a little bit better for Green.
hmm
In terms of the other counting stats, both of them are playing on great offenses right now. So the
Yeah.
runs and RBIs are certainly coming. It's just Pajes has just a little bit of advantage in the speed department compared to Green,
Right.
who just is never going to run. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
it's kind of like what do you want to weigh more? A guy who has maybe a little bit better average, maybe a little bit more power potential, or
hmm
do you want someone with maybe a little, not saying that Pajes has less power potential, but
Right.
uh, Greens just has more in general.
Yeah.
But he's got maybe a little bit more of a balanced makeup, which I think is
hmm
really a really interesting discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is definitely a little bit dependent on team construct, but yeah, they are like it's kind of weird. Yeah, they are pretty similar in that probably around the same range, probably like a little more stolen bases for any Bajes. Yeah, maybe not quite as much power and average. So
Mhm.
that's kind of depending on how you want to view it there.
Right. Yeah, and then kind of like you mentioned, if it's the OBP league, then yeah, it's Green kind of all the way,
Mhm.
just with the walk
Right.
rate's just better in that
Right.
context. And yeah,
hmm
I think Heliot's just kind of like he's nice and he's got
He's
some power
yeah.
speed, but he's
hmm
probably not in the same level right now as
hmm
these other guys.
Right, yeah, I agree. Like he's definitely I think he's followed up on his breakout season last year and kind of legitimized it, and he's definitely credible. Credible like good player, good, power speed player. And I think these other guys just offer a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was kind of fun because I was looking at the Fangraphs auction calculator, just kind of see how all these guys stack in terms of year to date numbers right now. And Pages is currently eighth and ahead of all these guys in terms of current fantasy value in at least a
Yeah.
roto league. It's maybe not as applied in week to week, but yeah,
hmm
Pages has been essentially a top 10 outfielder this entire season,
Yeah.
which is
That's
really incredible
remarkable.
to
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I mentioned him in a waiver wire article, kind of right in the middle of his struggle streak, where it was still within that time where he was still playing a lot. That's kind of what my basis was. He's like this is a
Hmm.
guy to watch at least. Like he's still playing every day in a Dodgers lineup, and kind of looked at what he did as a rookie. Good barrel rate, not a bad strikeout rate, and he's still playing a ton, so he could kind of spark any moment. And he just started making contact again, and here we are now. So.
Yeah, and we didn't really talk about this at length, but I mean, one of the big things that probably could have even added to that was when the Dodgers were dealing with some injuries here and there.
Yeah.
Has went up as high as number two in the batting order, right? Where
Yeah.
it was like, well, they clearly trust this guy
Mhm.
to be a good contributor at the top of their lineup, right? They're not just going to put anyone up there.
Right.
It just so happened, I think both maybe Mookie and Teoscar were hurt at that point, or at
Yeah.
least one of them was hurt to cause the rise in batting order. But
Yeah.
um, he's more now still in the back half of the lineup, and still I
Mhm.
think like that trust from the Dodgers maybe was a little bit of a little bit of a sign that like they think there's something with this kid.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think the long leash, like you mentioned there, is definitely notable because, he was hitting, in the 500 for OPS, striking out a ton, but he's still playing good defense. So I think that's kind of speaks, he was in the Dodgers' good graces. He provided himself a long leash of, good chance to provide him an opportunity to stick with the bat, and his defense, kept him afloat for a little bit, and yeah, bat came around.
Yeah. All right. Well, Kyle, thanks again for coming on the podcast talking about Andy Pies. And before we let you go, yeah, how can people maybe get in touch with you on social media, or are there any articles that you are kind of drafting, getting ready to send out over the next couple of weeks?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'm on Twitter at Kyle Stats X or Kyle Stats 1738. So you can follow me there, and yeah, I'll have an article coming out on Sunday, I believe. Right now, I'm kind of looking at risers and pulled fly ball rate, those sorts of things. Looking at hitters batted ball profiles, kind of who's getting who's doing some things right, who's doing nothing's worse, but who's changing things up from last year, and how is that working out for them this year? So yeah, that'll come out on Sunday, and yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, not to steal any thunder from that article, but I do feel like the pulled balls in the air metric has been one of the hotter
Mhm.
stats to quote this
For
season
sure.
because Statcast Big was like, we're going to tell everyone about this
Yeah,
now.
yeah, exactly. It was kind of like tricky to find in the past. You kind of had to, do a bunch of filters and understand, what you're doing. But now, yeah, Statcast has it all laid out there nicely for us, and we have, leaderboard, so we can dive into it nice and easy.
Yeah. All right. Well, looking forward to that article. And again, if you want to check out Kyle's article this past week on Andy Pajes, we'll have it linked in our show notes. But yeah, thanks for coming on the show, Kyle. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks again to Kyle. Of course, as I mentioned, check out his article. We'll have it linked in the show notes. As I mentioned, this is going to be a little different format for today's podcast. We're just going to cover injury notes as well as streamers for the following week. And next week, we'll be back to our scheduled programming, giving you some of those updates on player performances as well. We're going to start with some IL placements, starting with Ivan Herrera, catcher for the Cardinals. He's got a grade 2 hamstring strain. Looks like he'll be out for 2 to 6 weeks, if not a little bit longer. So a little unfortunate blow. I believe Pedro Pajes is going to be the starting catcher for the Cards at this point. Wade Miley of the Reds has a left flexor strain. He's on the IL. Davis Martin of the Chicago White Sox also on the injured list with a right forearm strain. Gabriel Moreno of the Diamondbacks, kind of a bad week for catchers. Got a right hand contusion. They're kind of expecting him to be back soon-ish, but not exactly. They don't have a timetable yet exactly for that. Lance McCullers got put on the IL on Saturday, dealing with a big toe sprain, but Houston kind of indicates that he is going to be only there for the minimum stint. So expect him back with the team probably sometime in the middle of next week. In terms of returns from the injured list, Wilyer Abreu of the Red Sox is back from the injured list pretty quickly, kind of as expected. But instead of Roman Anthony getting sent down to the minors, the Red Sox have decided to send Christian Campbell instead. Part of that is the dominoes from the Devers trade, which I guess we'll talk about in a little bit. But with Devers gone, the DH spot does open up, meaning that Roman Anthony can still stay as the DH on the team. Wilyer Abreu can play in the outfield. Luke Weaver of the Yankees got activated today, Friday. He is not coming back as the de facto closer, as Aaron Boone has announced. Him and Williams are going to share closing duties, and Devin Williams has looked pretty decent as of late. So I think that's definitely part of the reasoning for why Weaver's not coming back as the de facto closer. But both of them will have save opportunities, which is I guess kind of annoying if you're in a saves only league. But if you're in a save hold league, Luke Weaver is immediately a prime candidate to be on your roster, as he's going to be taking a lot of those opportunities. Frankie Montas of the Mets is returning to the rotation against Atlanta next week. That being said, it's probably not too much to get excited about. He did not look great in his rehab starts. Gave up a bunch of homers against minor leaguers. So take that information what you will. He is available. I probably would not think about picking him up unless it's a very deep NL only league and you're starving for pitchers. Maybe a good win chance with the Mets doing as well as they are, but yeah, nothing really too excited to get about Frankie Montas. Luke Raley of the Mariners got activated for this weekend series. The Mariners, as the corresponding move, ended up DFAing Rowdy Tellez. Raley just gives a little bit of a nice power bat. Still a little bit more of a platoon bat, though, for the Mariners. So maybe not exactly someone who you want on your fantasy roster just yet. Justin Verlander of the Giants returned against the Guardians this past week. Started for 4.2 innings, got 7 hits, 3 runs, 6 strikeouts, but did not get the win in this one. Yeah, he's back, which is good, and being having home games at Oracles is going to be helpful, I guess, in terms of suppressing some runs. But it's this start was still good to see the 6 strikeouts. I guess he still got some of the stuff. So probably still worth keeping on in a 15-teamer. I don't know if I'm necessarily picking up in a 12-teamer immediately right now. Giancarlo Stanton, the Yankees, he is back as the Yankees DH. Came back on Monday. He has not hit a homer yet. I think he's batting .333. He's got maybe 1 RBI. But he is right at the heart of the lineup. I think he's batting 4th. So the Yankees, of course, kind of dealing with a little bit of a losing streak this past week, but they have righted the ship since then. So maybe that gives Stan a couple more opportunities to get a few more counting stats. But it's hard to recommend him on a fantasy team as well because all he has is DH eligibility, and taking up your DH spot with someone, or your util spot with someone like Giancarlo Stanton does not seem to be maybe the best move. But we'll see if he maybe gets on a little bit of a hot streak, feels healthy again, and starts hitting more homers. All right, moving on to some other injury news. AJ Puk of the Diamondbacks officially underwent Tommy John surgery. He actually was just getting a consultation earlier this week, and it ended up, nope, you're getting Tommy John. So instead of maybe hoping for a mid-season return, he is now out for season, which means both Puk and Martinez probably not coming back this season, or Martinez specifically probably not coming back this season, which means Shelby Miller for sure is now the closer. And of course, even though that's not maybe the best option, he is the closer, so there's no one going to be taking any saves away from him anytime soon. Roki Sasaki was moved to the 60-day AL. This was more of an administrative thing since he's still shut down for pitching, but now he officially cannot return until July 13th, which is about a month away. I don't know if Roki Sasaki was even going to be coming back before then, so this is really more of a procedural move on behalf of the Dodgers. Reese Olson of the Tigers threw 58 pitches in his last rehab start. Probably needs one more start before returning, but he was a little nice contributor at the beginning of the season. Unfortunately, he was dealing with injury now. So one more start before returning. If you've got the spot on the injured list and Olson is available on your waiver wire, it's not a bad pickup, I think. He could be back to his old self once he returns. Max Scherzer of the Blue Jays could return to the rotation next week, depending on how his bullpen session goes this weekend. He did just have a rehab start where he threw 75 pitches, experienced a little bit of thumb soreness after that start, which is maybe a little expected, just after going that long. But if that bullpen session goes well, expect him to rejoin the rotation. Cole Ragans of the Royals, he is still going to be shut down from throwing for at least 2 more additional weeks, which probably puts his return still at least another month at the earliest, if not longer. So maybe an August return is probably the best case scenario for Cole Ragans. Masataka Yoshida of the Red Sox, as another effect of the Devers trade, Yoshida is now fast-tracking his rehab because he doesn't necessarily have to be working on his throwing at this point because now the DH spot is open. The Red Sox were putting him through a throwing program before they were ready to activate him because he was going to have to play in the outfield if he rejoined the Major League team. But now he can DH. Of course, as we mentioned, Roman Anthony is currently in that spot, so it'll be kind of an interesting spot for the Red Sox to decide what to do, whether they're going to bring Yoshida back as the DH, or if they're going to send Roman Anthony back down to the minors. And then, of course, have to talk about the Rafael Devers trade. He was traded for Kyle Harrison, who was immediately sent to AAA, Jordan Hicks, who is currently on the injured list, James Tibbs III, who I believe was a draft pick last season, and then Jose Bayo, who's a rookie reliever, I believe. Devers so far in 3 games with the Giants has DH'd. He did say when he joined the team that he was willing to kind of do whatever the Giants wanted him to do. The Giants currently have Casey Schmidt playing third base because Matt Chapman is injured with a sprained hand. Dominic Smith is playing first base. So if they decide they want to move off Dom Smith and have Devers play first, maybe he could get some additional positional eligibility. He should already have third in your leagues unless it's a weird setup for how position eligibility is determined. Matt Chapman it's kind of unclear how much longer he's going to be out for, but maybe they could decide that they don't want Casey Schmidt at third base and have Devers play a few games in the infield there. So some interesting decisions, of course, for the Giants as well in terms of positional eligibility, but at least for them, they don't have to worry about a player who says he doesn't want to play the positions that they want him to play. So a little bit interesting thing there. At least for the Red Sox side, I mean, in terms of what they got back, Kyle Harrison is in AAA. He wasn't there wasn't really too much to talk about in his starts for the Giants this year. And so, even if he does get called up for the Red Sox, it's actually a little bit worse for him, assuming it's a home start, because now he has to deal with Fenway instead of, the park dimensions of San Francisco. So it's kind of unclear whether that's really a good thing for him fantasy-wise. Jordan Hicks, as mentioned, was already on the injured list, and he was also, when he was playing in the bullpen for the Giants, whether this means that he's got a shot at the closer position with the Red Sox, I don't know if that's the idea behind the decision to trade for him. Of course, the Red Sox bullpen is not very good right now, and so I guess they could use Jordan Hicks when he comes back from injury as a main setup man or maybe even closer in their bullpen. So this might be a little bit of a longer play, but at the same time, I don't think there's a ton of value in terms of picking up Jordan Hicks because all of a sudden he's with the Red Sox now. So, I don't have too much on Tibbs or Bayo, but Devers getting traded is huge. Obviously, not having the monster now probably means that his average might go down a little bit. Playing in Oracle is a little bit tougher because of the dimensions of that park. In terms of maybe the runs and RBIs, that's still to be determined. The Giants aren't the greatest offense, but neither were the Red Sox. So that might be a wash in terms of additional runs or RBI chances. Just kind of pretty shocking news. I was pretty surprised when it happened. It was kind of crazy. But he is no longer a Boston Red Sox, which is kind of incredible. All right, we are going to look at some streamers before wrapping up this episode. And this week, I kind of want to focus on some two-start guys, just because those are kind of, in my opinion, the most valuable streamers. If you can just make one pickup and get two starts out of them. And of course, if they succeed for both of them, they're great, right? It ended up working out. But definitely, of course, check out Nick's SP Streamers article, as well as the predicted, or I guess I should say it's the pitching schedules article that Patrick actually contributes to, where they basically look at the next 4 starts for every pitcher in the majors, which is incredibly helpful and was definitely helpful in coming up with some of these names. But we're going to start with Ryan Yarbrough, who is 30% rostered on Yahoo, 11% on ESPN. He gets a 2-start week at Cincy and then home against the A's. Again, he's pitching for the Yankees, so that's kind of why I'm recommending this, despite the fact that maybe those matchups aren't the best. This is definitely an opportunity to get possibly 2 wins, but it might be a really tough ratios play because Yarbrough doesn't have the greatest home run per fly ball rate. He is not a ground ball pitcher, and if he's going to be pitching in Cincinnati and at Yankee Stadium, there's kind of a good chance that the Friday Pirate will end up giving up a couple home runs. Probably more than you'd like, but playing with the Yankees offense behind him, he should be able to generate some wins in those scenarios. He hasn't gone more than 5 so far in those last couple starts, so definitely not a quality start play if that's the type of league you have. But if you're looking for some wins and you're okay with taking a couple hits in the ratios, maybe Ryan Yarbrough is the play here. Eduardo Rodriguez, currently 9% rostered on Yahoo, 3% on ESPN, pitcher for the Diamondbacks, of course. This season, to say it's gone poorly for Erod might be a little generous, actually, as he has a 5.93 ERA and a 1.62 WHIP. Obviously, really terrible numbers. But he's got a 2-start week against the White Sox and the Marlins, and backed by this D-backs offense, which is still really good, even in June, even though they've cooled down a little bit. They're still top half of the league. He should be able to survive for 5 innings and get a win, especially against these 2 teams. And he might be able to provide a little little bit better ratios than his season stats would indicate, with, of course, the White Sox offense and the Marlins offense not being anything to write home about. So, yeah, this again is still maybe more of a wins play, but because of the poor competition, it could maybe turn into something a little bit nicer. And then finally, Chad Patrick of the Milwaukee Brewers, 28% rostered on Yahoo, 10% on ESPN. He's been quietly one of the better rookies in the National League this year with a 3.5 ERA, 1.28 WHIP. Of course, those aren't incredible numbers, but they're still pretty decent numbers for a rookie. He's averaging almost a strikeout an inning. I think it's 8.7 K per nine. That's quite surprising given his low swing and strike rate, which I think is around 11%. His CSW is around 24%. And yeah, those aren't necessarily great numbers. He's not wowing anyone with his stuff, but he's got a 2-star week against the Pirates and Rocky Road. That's pretty much about as good as you can get this season in terms of opponents. Like maybe the White Sox and the Marlins are a little bit worse than the combination of the Pirates and the Rockies, but I highly doubt it. The Rockies are awful, and the fact that they're away from home is just prime situation. So even if you maybe want to shy away from that Pirate start, I think that Rocky Road start should still be something that you should look at pretty closely. And again, with all these guys, right, they could be 1-star weeks as well. But if you're in weekly leagues, all three of these guys should be able to give you 2 decent starts. Maybe it's not everything you want, right? You might only get 1 win out of it. You might get some poor ratios out of it. But all three of these guys have an opportunity to contribute in major ways for your team as streamers this week. And yeah, especially as 2-star streamers, I think that's just super helpful if you've got innings cap in your league, or if you have more counting stats focus categories for pitching. All three of these guys should be able to help in some way. So that is going to wrap it up for streamers. Again, thanks to Cal McCarthy for coming on the show to talk about Eddie Pages. We are going to be back next week with Patrick as well for a regular episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. Again, you can find us on Twitter at ThisWeekPL. Email your comments and questions at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. You can find myself on Twitter at TheJohnK. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Pitcher List podcast feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. Lastly, sign up for Pitcher List Pro. By doing so, you can join us in the Pitcher List Discord and get advice from all the fantasy experts and writers over there. That is all for this week. Again, we'll be back next week with a regular episode. But yeah, that is all for this week in Fantasy Baseball. For Patrick and for Kyle, I am John, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, everyone.